Well, thank you very much. I guess we do just have a basic disagreement. In referring to America as a prison break, America is not a prison for American business. We have some of the most competitive businesses in the entire world. And to refer to it as a prison break is also wrong in that the reason these companies have suddenly renounced their American citizenship and gone abroad in many cases is because of the consistent refusal of our Republican colleagues to support measures to put a stop to it. They won't close the door to those who want to do their business here in America and head off to Ireland or the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands. And Dr. Clausing has some impressive data about that I would like to explore. Additionally, we've already seen the path, the rainbow to the pot of gold followed once in this committee already with the results that will be achieved if we do it a second time. And that is on the so-called Obamacare repeal, which was really nothing but a $1 trillion tax cut that rewarded certain special interests like pharmaceutical manufacturers and dramatically, again, widened the income gap by giving the benefits to those at the top rather than to the middle class. Of course, we don't know exactly how much it did that because it was rushed through this committee almost overnight, and we still don't have a score from the Congressional Budget Office for that ill-advised proposal. Even though they rushed it through, it's still sitting on the Speaker's desk. They weren't in such a rush, they sent it over to the Senate for action. Well, let's focus on the propaganda and mythology associated with today's proposal, the so-called better way. And one of the big aspects of the pot of gold that's out there waiting for us is $2.6 trillion that's just dying to come back to America if we will treat it right. Dr. Clausing, I would like to ask you about this $2.6 trillion in so-called stranded offshore earnings that could allegedly do so much good in creating jobs here in America. Is it true that much of that money can already be invested in the U.S. economy without those multinationals paying a dime of tax on it unless they earn money from their investments here? Indeed, aren't a substantial portion of that $2.6 trillion, isn't it already being held in Wall Street institutions right here onshore within the United States?
Agreed. Yes, much of that money is offshore, booked offshore for tax purposes, but it's still invested in U.S. assets through U.S. financial institutions. There are limits on what firms can do with that money. They can't give it back to their shareholders as dividends or as share repurchases, and this is why they're very anxious to get that money back. But they can still borrow against those funds, and the firms that have those funds abroad are some of the most creditworthy firms on the planet, and they have no trouble financing new investments.
And your paper shows that they, in fact, earn millions, if not billions of dollars in interest and dividends right here in the United States on their offshore earnings today.
That's correct.
Now, you mentioned the fact that they'd like to have this money back, not to create jobs, but to give high-earning executives even more high earnings and to give their shareholders dividends and stock buybacks. We've had a little experience with that before, and it's just really appropriate that former Chairman Thomas was here because he was the author pushing through this committee what was called the American Jobs Creation Act of 2004. How many jobs did that bill that this committee heard much of the same rhetoric that we're hearing in support of this measure, how many jobs did that bill create?
My understanding is that all economists who've looked at that bill found that it didn't create a single job or cause a single investment. And this includes some people who advised George W. Bush, who also looked into this. That money was used for dividends and share repurchases, and some of the firms that repatriated the most money actually laid off workers. It's possible it did have a small job creation effect for lawyers or accountants because there was a lot of complexity in the bill as well.
We were told by the chairman, follow the example of the Tax Foundation. Follow Estonia and Latvia and their tax policies. Do you think our companies will be more competitive if we adopt the Estonian and Latvian approach to international taxation? Are they competitive today in the international market?
Yes, the slides I showed earlier indicates they're quite competitive. We have profits these days that are 50% higher than they were in prior decades.
Thank you.
Thank you.